them directly if they have
At University of Indonesia in Britain, they wanted me to have an earphone in, but actually it was very annoying.
Make it more simple.
Because there's all these noises coming while I was trying to present. So this is Sergey, by the way. Yeah.
Directly, they have YouTube.
And Indonesia, we really wanted to have an earphone. Because there's only noises coming while I was trying to.
Kau bisa keluar deh. Yang tadi, Tapi belum ada orang ya? Belum ada. YouTube. One other copy.
These are people logged in that are chatting. But you can mute them once the session starts.
Welcome.
Yes, I have water. Water is better if I get thirsty when I'm talking. I have water. Sometimes my throat gets a little bit dry. These are people logged in that are chatting. You can mute them once.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, I have water. Yeah, they check it out too.
The YouTube. This. Saya Kita mulai deh. Can you see? Saya kelihatan.
Agak maju.
Oh iya. Jadi.
Harus mengarahkan fokusnya dia.
Okay, selamat pagi semuanya. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor for me to introduce our speaker today, Professor Paul Pierce from Melbourne University. And he was coming here in attachment with the ICTP. Maybe you know a bit about ICTP. ICTP is a center for theoretical physics, and also another center which is called APCTP. So the APCTP is Asia Pacific Center for Theoretical Physics. ICTP is located at Trieste, and APCTP is in Korea. And soon we will try to collaborate with these two institutes from ICTP and APCTP in ITB. So we will try to make a note from theoretical physics, ITB, and also connection with ICTP and APCTP. So detail about this, he will say a little bit more about this, and he would like also to introduce his subject. So he will also tell us a little bit about his subject, and I hope maybe people also involved in the tools like what he wants to present can be also part of our future network. So Paul, please.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Let me say from the outset that this will just be an informal talk, rather casual. So the outline of my presentation today is that first I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to talk about ICTP and APCTP and PCS IBS. That's three different institutes involved in our network. And I'll finish at the end by giving more details about the network, and then move on to announce some exciting developments since I arrived in Indonesia. So we formed a network starting in 2017, which ran for 3 years, from 2017 to 2019. And then we had to close it down for 3 years because of COVID. But now we've applied to the various funding bodies, ICTP and the APCTP, and the network will be funded for 3 years, 2023 to 2025. And the network consists of 2 institutes in Korea. That's APCTP, the Asia Pacific Center for Theoretical Physics, and PCS IBS, that's the Center for the Physics of Complex Systems. And it consists originally with 3 nodes in Southeast Asia. That was Vietnam, Thailand, and the Philippines. But now in the second iteration, we wanted to grow our network and expand. So I'm very happy to say that both Indonesia and Cambodia have now joined our network. So the ICTP is funding our network to the amount of 25,000 euros per year. And APCTP and PCS IBS are putting in similar amounts of money. So in total, the network is funded at the level of 75,000 euros per year. This enables a number of different activities and events. So this gentleman here, this is Sergey Black. So, but actually I should come back and start introducing myself properly first before I introduce Sergey. So as you know, my name is Paul Pierce. I have 2 positions, one at Melbourne University, which is in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. I work in mathematical physics, and I have a second appointment at the University of Queensland, and there I'm in the School of Mathematics and Physics. So I sit on the fence, halfway in mathematics and halfway in physics. I started my career in the area of statistical physics. So that's equilibrium, classical statistical physics, and I worked on exact results in that area. Being a mathematician, we're often interested in getting exact results. And then over the years, my area changed, and I started working in 1980 with Rodney Baxter at ANU, and therefore we worked on systems related to Yang-Baxter equations. That's two-dimensional statistical mechanical lattice models. So Ising models of ferromagnets, generalizations, 6-vertex models of ferroelectrics. And gradually, over the years, my interest has wandered further afield. These days, more recently, I've been working on systems like dimers, polymers, and percolation. So percolation is my main interest at the moment. But all of these studies are in 2 dimensions. Now, you might say, well, the real world is 3 dimensions. But actually, we use things like polymers in 2 dimensions. Your CD discs, okay, you stream now, you don't use CD discs anymore, but you know this plastic wrap. These plastics, they're made in sheets. It's 2-dimensional. Polymers are very long chains of molecules, and you can study those chains using statistical mechanics. And what is of interest in my field is the cooperative behavior. And in particular, at criticality, you're interested in understanding critical exponents that characterize the critical behavior. And these are divided into different universality classes. So, for example, if you look at bond percolation on the square lattice, and you look at triangular lattice, but with side percolation, people who work in statistical physics will tell you that these lie in the same universality class. And in recent years, my colleagues and I personally studied bond percolation on the square lattice and then side percolation on the triangular lattice. And we studied it using Yang-Baxter techniques, a lot of very mathematical, technical tools. But ultimately, we show beyond any question, these 2 systems do sit in the same universality class. In fact, they share a common description in terms of conformal field theory in the continuum scaling limit. They have the same set of critical exponents. They have the same conformal central charge. They have the same set of conformal weights, which are related directly to the critical exponents. They have the same conformal partition functions, which are the generating functions of the spectra for the conformal field theories. Now, systems like the Ising model, these are very simple. In the Ising model, you only have a certain number of operators in your theory. You have the identity, that's always there, even in a trivial theory. You have the magnetization, well, it's a model of a magnet. You're not surprised the magnetization is there. And there is one other, the energy. If you look at more general models, then the Ising model, you can have more operators, but for simple theories, you just have a finite number of those operators. And these theories are called rational, and they're described by rational CFT. So this is a class of theories which is very well understood, and the degrees of freedom in your model, the statistical physics, you have local degrees of freedom, spin up, spin down, or you may have spin 1. Plus or minus 1 or 0, and so on. Just a finite number of states for your local variables. But if you think of polymers, now you have a long chain. You don't have any local degrees of freedom. You have non-local degrees of freedom in the form of loop segments. And so you have to work with these loop segments, and when you study them, what you find is you get a different class of conformal field theories in the continuum scaling limit. And these theories are much more complicated. Instead of having a finite number of operators in your theory, there is now an infinite number. Instead of having simple representations, that is irreducible representations, you now have irreducible yet reducible but indecomposable representations. So the mathematics describing these theories are much more complicated. So this is my current area of study. Now, how did this idea of setting up a network come about? So this is Sergey Flack. He's the co-coordinator, or deputy coordinator of our network. He's in Korea, as you can guess from his name. His origin is German and Russian. He's the director of PCS IBS. So there was Sergey, myself, and one other gentleman from ICTP, which is this gentleman in the front here. This is George Thompson. He runs the programs of ICTP, which are meant to help developing countries. And here he's in Rwanda with physics students there. He's actually Australian. He comes from my home city, Melbourne. In fact, he used to live very nearby. We've been friends for many, many years. But the three of us were on a train from Pohang to Seoul, and we had nothing to do, so we were chatting and throwing around ideas, and we conceived of forming a network which involves Korea and nations in Southeast Asia. And we decided it can be funded jointly by using programs from ICTP, from ABCTP, and Sergey said, well, he'll put in money too. So the money coming from PCS IBS, this is to support their scientists, their faculty and their students to participate in the network, whereas the money coming from ICTP and APCTP to support participation from all the other countries represented in the network. So what does the network do? So the network operates and has a number of events each year. Typically, we're going to run 2 to 3 workshops a year. 2 will take place in Korea, so they will mainly involve APCTP and PCS IBS, but anyone in the network from outside can come and join. We don't have funds necessarily to support that participation in those workshops, but in principle, anyone can come. In fact, there's visitor schemes at both APCTP and PCS IBS, so people from outside can go and visit. And if you're part of our network, you will get some priority to get local support. So, using your support from your home institute and support from APCTP or PCS IBS, you may be able to participate. In addition to the workshops each year, we have one annual school, a large one. So this year that will take place in Hanoi in November. And we try to get as many funds as we can to support as many students from the different countries and nodes in our network to come and participate in each of our annual schools. So in the first iteration, we had schools in Hanoi. You can go to the web pages, I'll show you in a moment. The first school we had was in Hanoi. The next one was in Nakhon Ratchasima in Thailand. And the third one was in Manila in the Philippines. In the second iteration, we're going to have schools in the same order in those 3 places, because they're the 3 nodes from those countries. But in addition, next year, in the middle of the year, we're going to have a combined mini school and workshop here in Indonesia. And that will take place at the University of Indonesia. And of course, you're all invited to participate. So I should say that the coordinators for the node for Indonesia are Aziz Majidi from University of Indonesia, and Agung from ITB is the second coordinator for the node in Indonesia. In addition, I should say the third aspect of our activities is that we run scientist exchange visits. So the EU puts in 10,000 euros per year to support scientists to visit from their own home to go and visit 1, 2, or more nodes in our network. So you may put in a proposal to Sergey and I, and we'll look at it and say, yeah, that looks good. We'll support you. We ask you to bring some support from your home institute and to apply for support from the institutes, your host institutes that you'll visit. But with the three sources, there should be enough money for you to go ahead. You might want to go from here to Hanoi, visit some people in Vietnam, from Hanoi to Korea, PCS, IBS, and ABCTP, and not far apart. In principle, you could visit both, but you could choose to visit one or the other, depending on your interests and who you make contact with. So that's the third part.
But this mainly for staff.
So
How about for students?
as far as ICTP is concerned, they're even prepared to support students. But Sergey and I, between us, decided that this program should be restricted to faculty and early career researchers. Right? The purpose of this program is to stimulate collaboration. So if you have a collaborator somewhere in this region, this in our network, it means you can make a number of trips so that you can conduct a project together. This is the idea. So I invite you to find out a lot more about ICTP, APCTP, and PCS-IBS in their programs. Here is the homepage for ICTP. ICTP is in Trieste, in Italy, on the Adriatic coast. It's supported by money, well, it was set up by Abdus Salam. It's supported by money from UNESCO, but mainly from the Italian government. So if you go to their page, you can see there's lots of detail here, different sections. You can have a look at all their programs. There are many programs, and where possible, you should try to take advantage of them. And we already are taking advantage of quite a number in our network. So, for example, I'm supported as an ICTP scholar. That means they paid my airfare to come here and go on to APCTP. I visit APCTP for 4 weeks, and they pay for my airfare back to Australia. So that's one program of theirs that we're using. They run the scientist exchange. That's what they actually label as the network component. And then they also support scientific meetings. So each of the workshops and schools that we run, we apply to them, and they typically support it to the amount of 5,000 euros. You should also go to the APCTP page. APCTP, the home is in Pohang. It's hosted by Postec University, which is a very large university. They have a very large science program. So it's Pohang Science and Technology University. That's the meaning of Postec. And APCTP runs very many programs similar to ICTP, and you can go to their pages. So, for example, when I visit APCTP after leaving here, I'm hosted under their scientist visitor program. So if you're taking some study leave, or you can get leave and you want to spend a period of a month or a few months in APCTP, you can apply, and there are funds available to support your visit. I should say that Indonesia is now a country member. So this is a new development. When I visited Britain, I managed to secure a meeting with Handoko, and he committed to paying US $10,000 per year for Indonesia to become a member country, with Britain as the member entity. So within the APCTP, Britain will represent Indonesia. So each member country at APCTP has a representative on the General Council. The General Council is a forum for cooperation within the Asia-Pacific region. There are currently 17 member countries for the APCTP, and Indonesia will be number 18. And the representative for Indonesia will most likely be Aziz Majidi. He will actually attend the General Council meeting, which takes place very soon on the 17th of March. Once Indonesia is formally accepted as a member country by the Board of Trustees, I've been on the Board of Trustees since 2007. I was chair for 3 years. The APCTP will be very, very happy to welcome Indonesia. There's 280 million people here, and growing by 5 million a year. That's a lot of potential for doing science in this country. And ICTP and APCTP are in the business of promoting theoretical physics in this region. So ICTP is international, APCTP is Asia Pacific, but even ICTP is very interested in this region because by investing in Southeast Asia in particular, their limited funds can make a difference. And there's just huge potential. So they want to focus on this region. So that's a big development, a positive development that Indonesia is now a member country.
Are we the last
of
member
APCTP?
country? Are we the last member country?
No. Cambodia will be next. I visit Cambodia in November.
So hopefully we are not the last.
No. No, you will not be the last. APCTP continues to grow in the number of member countries and in its funding. The Korean ministry is actually quite generous with their funding. So any fees that are paid in membership to the APCTP returns all of that money and much more to support activities in the member country. This is how they promote theoretical physics in the region. In addition to becoming a member country, the University of Indonesia will apply to become a member institute. So let me explain that being a member country means all disciplines across theoretical physics and all of Indonesia. So everybody in Indonesia and every university and institute can benefit as long as it's theoretical physics. University of Indonesia is becoming a member institute and paying membership fees of $2,000 a year, but this is targeted to support its participation in the network. And I didn't say this previously, but let me say it now. The network is focused on 3 disciplines: condensed matter physics, complex systems, and statistical physics. So the University of Indonesia, being a member institute, is focused on those areas and focused on supporting the network. There are still more developments that occurred from my discussions with Handoko, and that is BRIN and APCTP will look to introduce 20 YST positions at APCTP reserved specifically for Indonesians. So YST means Young Scientists in Training. These are 1-year positions. Early career researchers from Indonesia can apply to the APCTP. Up to now, we have had 3 such Indonesians take up YST positions, which I can name 2, Prada and Jafar. I always can never remember the name of the third one. It's difficult for me to pronounce, but there has been 3, and now 20 positions hopefully will be negotiated. And of course, these positions across all areas of theoretical physics and experimental physics is the hope. And the idea is to accommodate experimental physicists, not in APCTP, because that's theory, but in the post-tech physics department, because they have access to experimental facilities.
Synchrotron, they have synchrotron.
So these are very attractive positions. The first-class facilities are available at APCTP and in post-tech. This 1-year experience has been very profitable for people who have previously taken up these positions, not just from Indonesia, but throughout the Asia-Pacific region. So these positions are suitable for someone just after a PhD, or you could be 3 years out of a PhD, or if it's thought that it will be a benefit to you, all you have to do is apply. And if our negotiations with the Korean Ministry and Post-Tech University are successful, hopefully these positions will be set up within some months. We have to see. So that's 3 very positive developments. Indonesia is now a member country of APCTP. University of Indonesia is now a member institute of APCTP. And it's hoped that these 20 positions for young scientists in training will be created at APCTP, and they'll be supported jointly with funds coming from BRIN and from APCTP. That's the idea. Let me just check if there's something I've forgotten to talk about. At the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions. Yeah, I think that's most of the points I wanted to touch on. But let me reiterate the main points of interest to participate. Firstly, you can participate in the program. That's what I didn't show you. I knew there must have been something I didn't show you. Let me show you the home pages of our network. Yeah. So if you go to, if you just put in PCS-IBS and do a Google search, it'll take you to the PCS homepage. And then you go to activities, and then it'll bring you to the ICTP Asian Network homepages. So our web pages are hosted at PCS-IBS. It's convenient for us to do that. And here you can see the structure of the nodes, one at APCTP POSTEC, one PCS-IBS, Daejeon. In Vietnam, the node is hosted under the Vietnamese Academy of Science and Technology, but more specifically, the Institute of Physics or the Center for Theoretical Physics. Suvarnabhumi University of Technology is in Korat, or Nakhon Ratchasima, that's Thailand. Then comes the Philippines. The main institute involved there is National Institute of Physics, but you can see there are many institutes involved in our network. Here comes University of Indonesia. So these pages are still in development. There are many errors that I have to get fixed. So this should be University of Indonesia, BRIN, and ITB. In Cambodia, there the node will be the Royal University of Phnom Penh. I should also point out that ICTP contribute directly by sending scientists to lecture at our workshops in schools. And 4 scientists from ICTP, these are quite distinguished scientists, have agreed to participate in our activities. So they are very strong scientists, and you can see there are lots of different institutes participating in our network. And now under each node, if you look, you can see my name here. I'm attached. There is no node in Australia. I'm attached to the APCTP node. You can see a list of names. So these are all faculty, early career researchers, postdocs and so on, research fellows participating. We have much longer lists of students that will participate, but we don't put them on the public web pages. So you can see if I go down to Indonesia, Aziz Majidi is here. And you should recognize lots of names there. Some people were just roped in and their names added, and now they can benefit because they can make use of all these events and facilities and participate fully. Of course, sometimes people leave, like me, they may be retired and become inactive. So we will update and bring in new people. So for example, there have just been some new appointments at the University of Indonesia. 4 young physicists were appointed. We'll add their names in here. We can continue to add names as more and more people become interested in participating in the network, and we get to know each other. I mean, this is very much about making connections for researchers, but also for students. You know, our previous schools in Vietnam, Thailand, and Philippines, one of the amazing things is that for these students, it was the first time they ever traveled. And because in Southeast Asia, everything is close, all travel is visa-free and it's relatively cheap to travel. So we could bring in lots of students and they get to know each other. They become friends. And these people will be the leaders of the future. And if you have some understanding of your neighbors, this is good for everybody. So maybe at that point, I'll stop and call for questions, including from the Zoom audience.
Yeah, not so many people from Zoom.
So this young scientist and training.
Yeah.
We apply to
APCTP.
Do you apply?
So APCT put out a call each year. At the moment, they have two categories, the regular YST, and they also have a category for APEC YST, which is sponsored under APEC and open to APEC countries. And the idea is to introduce a third category, which will be BRIN/APCTP. And there's a call put out. And so you just go to the APCTP web pages, and from time to time they put out a call. And when a call is put out, anyone from Indonesia can apply for one of these YST positions. If they have some position in Indonesia, they will have to apply for leave. They will have to apply for visas and so on. But of course, if 20 positions are created, the probability that you're accepted is quite high.
And the subject must be
Theoretical physics.
theoretical physics.
I know YST is across all of theoretical physics, but under the category APCTP BRIN, we're allowing experimental physicists. The only difference is, I mean, they'll apply to APCTP, they'll be processed in the same way. They have a committee that ranks the candidates and selects the candidates. The only difference is instead of having an office at APCTP, they will have an office in POSTECH.
Yeah.
And as a member of the POSTECH physics, you know, if they're visiting POSTECH physics department, they will have some nominal supervisor, someone responsible for them, and they will gain access to experimental facilities.
So when you apply there, you need to find a post supervisor.
No, that will be arranged after you're accepted.
But you have to specify what subject.
They ask for quite a bit of information about you and your track record and so on when you apply. Yes. I mean, it's like applying for a job. It's a very similar process. They get your personal details. They get your academic qualifications. They ask about your recent publications. They'll ask about your proposed project. These are all things that are taken into account in appointing these YSTs. But with 20 positions from Indonesia, it's very competitive usually. It will not be quite so competitive.
Yes.
So this is very good.
It is earmarked for Indonesia.
It's earmarked only for Indonesia. So I know it's 50% supported from Indonesia, but it would be earmarked only for Indonesians. Let me stress again, though, there are some negotiations that need to take place before this program can start. But at APCTP, we're very confident that this will go through.
So basically, for student participations, they probably need first the doctoral degree, or they can be some postgraduate programs.
Graduate positions.
Postgraduate.
So they need a doctoral degree, yes. I can tell you that one of the purposes of my current visit to APCTP is to apply for another program from ICTP, which is called an ICTP affiliated center. I was the coordinator of such an affiliated center at APCTP previously, but that was focused on quantitative life sciences. So APCTP views theoretical physics very broadly. So they, from time to time, have junior research group leaders and junior research groups working on topics in biophysics or quantitative life sciences. At that time, they had 2 or even 3 such junior research groups. A junior research group comprises of a junior research group leader. Indonesians can now apply for those and get priority, being a member country. And they're given research grants, which typically support 2 postdocs and even some students. So there are 9 such groups, junior research groups at APCTP. And of course, calls go out from time to time for a new junior research group leader. And then that leader will put out calls for postdocs to appoint and students. Now, to get back to the affiliated program, we're going to apply for the affiliated center, which will probably include condensed matter physics, complex systems, statistical physics, but also high energy and particle physics. This is what's being discussed, but the details haven't been worked out yet. But we want to be a little bit more broad. We're moving away from quantitative life sciences. And this is to bring in students So the ICTP pay, I think, 12,000 euros a year to support a PhD student to come and visit for, say, 6 months or 1 year as part of their PhD. So they're enrolled in the home institute, and then the ICTP supports them to have this experience outside of their home institute, and they would have a co-supervisor at POSTECH. APCTP is a research institute. It doesn't have, it doesn't award degrees.
Yeah.
So there's one question, what about the one who come from mathematics?
I'm from mathematics. My
That was the question from Zoom.
I'm just being flippant, making some fun. Theoretical, APCTP and ICTP both support mathematics.
Because
Okay, they prefer not to support,
ICTP also includes mathematics.
yeah, it includes mathematics. They prefer not to support pure mathematics. They would rather applied or mathematical physics, but they certainly support mathematics where they can. So, for example, each country usually has a number of member institutes. So Indonesia now has 2, BRIN and University of Indonesia, not ITB.
Soon, maybe soon.
Australia also has 3. One of those is Matrix Research Institute. This is purely a mathematics institute, and it's a member institute, and its activities are supported through APCTP.
So yes, it's possible from
It's
mathematics. Yeah.
Yeah. But as I say, we prefer applied variety and not so much pure, if you're interested in just algebra for algebra's sake. If you're interested in algebras applied to physical systems, not a problem.
No.
But algebras for algebra's sake, maybe not of so much interest to people in theoretical physics, and therefore APCTP and even ICTP.
Okay. Okay, so I think we should move to your scientific talk. We can move to your scientific talk.
I wasn't going to give a scientific talk. You said that this will go over the heads of people here.
Yeah.
And we have to go to lunch, right?
Yeah, but maybe a little bit about.
You want a little bit more about my research?
No, I mean the one that title in your talk.
I can go to that. Yeah, sure. Let me just pull it up. So. It's not a bad idea. I can just flash some pictures. Yeah. Okay, so very good. So the title of my talk that I gave both at University of Indonesia and also at RIN is Yang-Baxter integrability in 2-dimensional classical and 1-dimensional quantum models. So I spoke about models like classical Ising model, vertex models associated with ferroelectricity, dimers, polymers, and percolation. These are 2-dimensional models, but if you go to the so-called quantum Hamiltonian limit, you obtain quantum models. So I'm also working on 1-dimensional quantum physics. So, for example, if you take the 2-dimensional Ising model and go to the quantum limit, you get the here at the bottom here. This is the transverse Ising model. So this is the quantum 1-dimensional Ising model. This was first solved exactly by Fute in 1970. So this just comes out of the study of the 2-dimensional classical Ising model with interactions on a square lattice. If you start instead with a vertex model, such as the 6-vertex model, and then take the quantum Hamiltonian limit, you end up with the anisotropic Heisenberg model, 1 dimension. But using the Yang-Baxter methods, you can study many models, some of much more significance, like the Hubbard model. So I'm interested in 2 dimensions and 1 dimension. Now, this is Rodney Baxter. He was my supervisor for 5 years when I was in Canberra. He's Australian. We're very proud of Rodney Baxter. But being Australian, you can see on the right-hand side, he has a beer in his hand. So when I first met him, He always had a cigarette in one hand and a beer in the other. I don't know how he managed to do physics. So let me see what I can say. Yeah. So you might also recognize this gentleman on the left, C.N. Yang. Actually, C.N. Yang is responsible for setting up APCTP. Abdus Salam set up ICTP, C.N. Yang set up APCTP. And because of the connection with the Yang-Baxter equation, the APCTP has always strongly supported integrable systems, the field of research in integrable systems and Yang-Baxter equations. So at the top here, you see a representation of what a Yang-Baxter equation is. You see that there are two perspectives of a cube here, and the three faces you can see are labeled A, B, and C. But if you push face C, you see the different colors through to the left, so it comes out here, and then interchange A and B, you get this combination of three faces. And this is what the Yang-Baxter is, the Yang-Baxter equation. It involves the Boltzmann weights of three faces. So you can associate a local Boltzmann weight with the configuration of a face. So of course, Boltzmann weight is e to the minus something over kT, and that something is an energy. So there is some energy associated with the configuration of the face, and therefore a Boltzmann weight. And this diagram on the left represents the product of three Boltzmann weights. So there's some allowed configuration on the perimeter that's spins. Think of it as easing plus or minus spins, A, B, C, D, E, F. The dotted lines just means that these spins are identified. And now you push this one through to the right, and it comes out this side. And as you do so, the U and V are interchanged. And this equation should hold for all A, B, C, D, E, F when you sum out the center spin value, which say plus or minus 1, on the left and the right-hand side. So this is a local relation. This diagram represents many equations. And for the Ising model at criticality in zero field, all of these Yang-Baxter equations are satisfied. And the power of the Yang-Baxter equation is that it provides for commutation. So the way you study lattice models is you build up a whole row. So that means you're taking products of all the Boltzmann weights of the faces along a row. So T of U represents the bottom row, T of V the top row, and to build up a square lattice, a large one, you should multiply them together. So you build up one row at a time, and as you build it up, you sum over the intermediate row. Now, in addition to the Yang-Baxter equations, the faces for the Ising model also satisfy this inversion identity, which basically says if you take the product of two faces, you see these are the same here, these spins are the same there. If you take the product of two faces where the parameter on the two faces just differs in sign, you get an identity. This is a Kronecker delta in AC, which means A must be equal to C, but B is B and D is D. So as you move horizontally, everything stays the same. It acts as an identity. So what that says is you can cut this open when you multiply two transfer matrices together, put in these two because they annihilate the values of the parameter, just differ in sign. And then if you look here, you have the three faces of the local Yang-Baxter equation. So I can push this one through, but it interchanges U and V. And then I can keep pushing it through until it comes out of the other side. This one is just a spectator. But now I have periodic boundary conditions. So I can push this one around to this side. This V minus U comes on that side. But now these annihilate again. And I'm just left with the product of two faces. But now the V's have moved to the bottom and the U's are up the top. So this is a product TV by TU. We have commutation of a one parameter family of transfer matrices. This seems like an uninteresting mathematical property, but actually all of the power of the Yang-Baxter techniques derive from this simple fact. The Ising model in zero field was first solved by Onsager in 1944 for the free energy, and by C.N. Yang for the magnetization in 1952. But these papers are very, very difficult to read. Onsager was actually a chemist. He got his Nobel Prize for reciprocity, working chemistry. But his paper solving the two-dimensional Ising model was a mathematical tour de force using Lie algebras and many different mathematical techniques. Using these techniques is relatively straightforward. You can now teach this to undergraduate students and they can solve the Ising model at critical field, and they can derive the critical behavior of that two-dimensional magnet with up and down spins. So my whole research is really trying to push how far you can get by using such local relations. I'll just say that. Yep. You can also work with boundaries, but now you have to work with double row transfer matrices. Here I have a double row multiplied by a double row, and now we have more local relations called boundary Yang-Baxter equations, and you can actually work with systems of double row transfer matrices in the presence of a boundary, and they also commute. And so you can solve for things like boundary-free energies and understand the boundary phenomena. So in idealized systems, you work with an infinite extent in your two-dimensional material, but in the real world, you have boundaries and you have boundary conditions. The Ising model, you have all spins up, or all spins down, or you can have free boundary conditions. Actually, these are the three operators that appear in the conformal field theory. When you have all spins up, this is the identity. When you have free boundary conditions, this is the magnetization. And when you have plus on one side and minus on the other, this is the energy operator. So you really understand deeply by using transfer matrices the properties of these two-dimensional lattice models, but also in the continuum scalar limit, where you make contact with the continuous description, the universal description in terms of conformal field theory. So to go any further would take a lot more time and become much more technical, so I'll definitely stop there. Maybe I'll leave the pretty pictures. It's quite remarkable that you can work with these diagrams, and when you work with systems like polymers and percolation, you only work diagrammatically. You use certain algebras introduced by Gordon Jones, who won the field medal. He is from New Zealand, but we claim him as Australian. He died recently, unfortunately. But he introduced a certain class of algebras, which are diagrammatic algebras, where all the relations and in all the algebraic calculations are done using diagrams. And that's essentially what's going on here. We're using diagrammatic algebras, including the Templey-Lieb algebra, introduced by Templey and Lieb many years ago, and first introduced in the context of percolation. But now we understand that we can use Yang-Baxter equations and the Templey-Lieb algebra to solve percolation exactly at the critical point, not away from the critical point, but only at the critical point, at least for systems like bond percolation on the square lattice and side percolation on the triangular lattice. All right, I'll stop, because otherwise I could talk forever.
Okay. So, are there any questions? You mentioned about the Hubbard models.
Mhm.
The Hubbard models involve the hopping terms.
Yes.
And in this case, how these hopping terms proceed? Because in this algebraic diagrams, it seems that you can only shift the phase, but the
Yes, when you say Hubbard model, you're
Yeah.
talking about one-dimensional quantum model. So the transfer matrix is actually an operator. Transfer matrix is one-dimensional. It's actually an operator. So when you're talking about a quantum system, you're really studying just that one-dimensional operator. And the transfer matrix is actually e to the u by the Hamiltonian. So this is how you can get from the transfer matrix to the Hamiltonian. It's not always obvious looking at a two-dimensional model what terms come out in the Hamiltonian limit. But it's quite typical that you have these hopping or exchange terms when you take the limit of certain vertex models, which I haven't described at all.
So it's automatically.
Yes.
You can get this?
Well, you have to study the right two-dimensional system. So every time you have a two-dimensional system, you take the Hamiltonian limit, you get a certain quantum model, right? But if I say I have this quantum model, and now what is the two-dimensional system? It's not easy to say.
Okay.
Right? One-dimensional quantum model is integrable if you can derive it from the solvable two-dimensional model. If you don't have the two-dimensional model to start with, you only have the quantum model, you don't know if it's even integrable.
Okay.
So you have to find the right two-dimensional model to study. So people study two-dimensional models associated with all sorts of different affine or classical Lie algebras to find all sorts of interesting quantum chains described by these symmetry algebras.
Okay. But there is a recent paper. It was more experimental proof for young Baxter, and it appears in NMR work. It's related to the quantum information.
Yes, there are lots of applications in quantum entanglement, quantum information, and so on. The Yang-Baxter equation is a mathematical statement, and therefore it requires a mathematical proof within some context. Sorry, but there's no such thing as an experimental proof. You may argue it's verification, but it's not a proof.
Verification.
Somehow it establishes that what comes out, what follows from the Yang-Baxter equation in integrability agrees with what comes out of experiment. And the first instance where this occurred was Rodney Baxter managed to solve a model called hard hexagons, where basically you lay hexagonal tiles, non-overlapping, on the plane, right? Now you can think of forming a substrate which is made out of graphite, so they have hexagonal cells, and now you adsorb a monolayer of helium onto that surface, and now you can adjust the parameters experimentally, so you can tune it, and you can measure things like specific heat and extract critical exponents. And the critical exponents that came out of Rodney Baxter's exact solution of that system precisely agree with the numerical estimates of what was obtained in the lab. This is a nice experimental verification of Yang-Baxter technology.
Great.
As I say, there are many two-dimensional systems which are relevant in physics, so they're worthy of study. What time is our lunch? We're meeting with the vice rector.
Yeah, it's 12:30. So then.
Okay, but maybe I will need a bit of a break beforehand.
Okay.
So let's quick to stop here.
First questions? Students? Okay, now then let's thank Paul again. So thanks for coming, and hope maybe ITB also can be note members. So joining University of Indonesia for theoretical physics.
I think there's one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Many.
It's on the chat or?
We'll pull it up.
Huh?
You can pull it up then.
For it what?
Oh,
Yeah.
It's here. Here's questions.
Yeah, maybe just read it out.
You can
Okay.
ask how do you recommend for mathematics students approach?
Okay, so I learned this subject matter from Rodney Baxter's book. In fact, it's this thick. I was the proofreader. So I learned by looking very carefully at every symbol, but I don't recommend that you do this. Rodney Baxter's book is famous for good reason. It's an exceptionally good book, but it's not for beginners. It takes a lot of study to absorb the material that's in Rodney Baxter's book. Usually for physics students, a better introduction is the book by Kirsten Huang.
Kirsten,
Kirsten Huang is a more general introduction to statistical physics.
statistical mechanics.
And this is much more advanced for studying two-dimensional exactly solvable models. So there is no shortcut, I'm afraid.
Need more experience.
Yeah, it's like learning any new topic. You start by listening to talks, you absorb a little bit here, you absorb a little bit there, and then it starts to gel and make sense together, and then you start to grow the part that you know, and then over many years, of course, then you start to understand one topic very well, but then you talk to a specialist in some other area and you're back to start. So, for example, as the coordinator of this school, I've been the coordinator of the network, I've been attending many schools on condensed matter physics. I've listened to many condensed matter physicists give talks. I'm not a condensed matter physicist, so I find it hard to understand, but I'm now finding, after listening to so many talks, I'm beginning to understand. And that's the process you have to go through.
Yeah. Well, okay. So thanks again. So terima kasih for joining Zoom.
Yeah, thank you for your attendance today. It was a great pleasure to
So
be able to address you and explain all of these exciting developments that are happening now. I'm looking forward to theoretical physics advancing in the coming years rather rapidly in Indonesia.
okay, terima kasih.